First off, we've got to call out in this video the Method wheels and the 33-inch by 1250 BFG KO2 tires. So it's already looking awesome. It caught a little bit of lift just from going from, I think it was like a 28.5-inch tire, the stockies, into this 33-inch tire. So really looks great. It's got a really wide footprint. Yeah, couldn't be happier with the way this looks. Then this video is going to be about a 2-inch lift. So we're going to have brand new Old Man Emu shocks, front and rear obviously, and then we'll have a Old Man Emu steering stabilizer, and it's going to be a 2-inch lift with a medium load. So if you've ever shopped the Land Cruisers and you've shopped the Old Man Emu lifts, you can do like heavy rated springs that are going to pick it up quite a bit higher than the called for lift. So if it's a 2-inch with a heavy rated spring, you're probably going to get like 3 inches, but that's compensating for like adding rear bumpers and a lot of extra weight. So the idea with this build is to keep it kind of lower center of gravity kind of thing, not go sky high. Notice it's not 35-inch tires. So same with the front. So we're going to come up 2 inches, and it should also kind of kill some of the rake and make us a little flatter on the ride. So I won't be doing a full send tutorial. I'll just break down kind of the step-by-steps along the way, maybe how it's going. Hoping that the bolts and nuts are friendly to me and I'm not busting out the torch every 10 seconds. But here we go. We're gonna get to it now. Well, first things first, right? So we've got to get our tires chalked. So I've got the rear tires chalked in the front and the rear. And then I've been jacking up the Cruiser by its axle. And this is the cool part. This is a bone stock. I have not started anything yet. And that's some pretty serious droop. If you remember how the fender was almost on top of the tire, basically, that's, I don't even know, 7 or 8 inches of droop. It's completely on the ground. And it's also completely, the frame is sitting on the jack stands. So what I'm gonna do is pick up each side. I'm gonna go ahead and zip these lug nuts off. And I'll cut back after I've done that. First things first, let's lay the parts out and make sure everything is here that we're gonna need. So I've got my rear springs set back to each corner. I'll explain why these are here and those are there. I've also got my fronts. Notice that they are thicker as far as I guess just thicker in general. Coil in the rear than the front. The front is usually that taller, skinnier one in every case I've ever seen. Also, on the part numbers, these have a little B on them. Now, in the Australian market, this is an Australian company, being Old Man Emu. So the driver's side is actually on the opposite side. So the A part numbers are actually for the driver's side for the Australian market. And then the B is usually the passenger side, where here in the US, obviously it's the opposite. So I'm laying these out. They are corner specific. I'm also going through making sure that with like my steering stabilizer, I went through, the parts are all here for that. Got caster correction parts over there. I've got my front and rear shocks all laid out. I have all the hardware here that's going to be needed for this. So that's a good thing. Also, again, I mentioned new hardware. You're definitely going to need it because these bolts, I'm hoping I don't have to do too much cutting. But they're rusty looking, obviously 30-year-old vehicle. So that's going to be, I guess, come with the territory. So all the parts are here, so we can now begin doing our thing. All right, just like that. We've got the wheels and tires off, set to the side. We're sitting on my jack stands. I have done the, aggressive wiggle test to make sure that the jack stands are set in place. There's no movement. I've had the WD-40 going on any of the potential bolts I'll be taking off here, obviously. So I have lubed up the bottom of the, the bottom shock, or bottom of the front shock. And then right there is my light. There it goes. You can see the wet bolt there at the top of the shock tower. This guy right here. This has been soaked now 3 times, and I do see some of that rust coming away, so I'm just praying that it's not going to be a complete nightmare. It's already going to be hard to get to because it's right under our brake master cylinder, so this is already, I'm assuming, going to be a pain in the butt. And 2 other things to mention before you do this. So this is holding the brake lines, right? You don't want these things to get pulled. And when I start drooping the axle, when I move this rolling jack, when I start drooping the axle, you don't want those lines to get pulled too hard. So it's gonna be important to go ahead and drop that line so it doesn't tug when the axle droops. And then I'm also gonna be taking away the sway bar. So that way the axle, as you can see, it kind of loops through the sway bar right there. You want that to be able to droop freely, not hanging on the sway bar or something causing bindage while I'm doing this. So again, I'm gonna be removing the brake line bracket and the sway bar links next before I remove the axle, the jack, and I'll droop the axle at that point. Brief side quest here real quick. I can never leave things alone. Notice how beat up the hubs are here. You know, had better days, a little rust. The other one had a lot more rust on it actually. So of course, while I'm doing this, we got new wheels, new tires, looking fresh. I blasted this puppy with the wire wheel, and I'll get the next one too. So this right now is just exposed metal, and then I'll be touching this up with like a black primer paint, rust reformer kind of thing. Just so that way when this hub is exposed, when the wheels are back on, we'll be looking pretty. It's a little thing. So this is all sprayed in, taped off, sprayed in. So everything on the hub that's exposed inside those new pretty wheels is going to look great. It was kind of caked in just, you know, grime and whatever. So wire wheeled that down to silver, to bare silver, and the casting here. And then, yeah, just sprayed it with like a rust preventative primer paint, and it looks great. And then while it's drying, I went ahead and disconnected the sway bar. So it mounts to this little guy right here, and it hangs, as you can see there. So now that that's drooping all the way down, I'm gonna go ahead and let the axle down and see how much droop we have. Blammo. All right, so as you can see, that nut is off. The other one came off. Actually, ironically, I thought that would be worse. You know, or I'm sorry, I thought this would be worse, but it really wasn't too bad. I drowned it in WD-40 4 times over the last hour before I tried it. It really goes a long way. Do not underestimate the WD-40. The lowers, which is right there, came off pretty straightforward. So the next thing is going to be letting the axle down with my rolling jack. There should be nothing left to hold it up other than the control arms, clearly. So, and then once that's out, we are gonna try for the coils. So we're at a full droop now. So if you don't have spring compressors, you can, you know, start like stomping, you know, down, and you'll see this all flex and you can start pulling. But the spring compressors basically are a tool you're gonna stick on either side of the, well, it's upside down. Either side of the spring, right? The coil spring. Once you do this and you start drilling down on this, it's just gonna close or compress the spring a bit. This isn't as necessary at this point with the stock springs, but with the new springs, because they're gonna be a lot taller for that 2-inch lift, also they accommodate for a bit more weight. So it's gonna be a little bit harder to compress and get that under there. So for sure, you wanna use something like this. Otherwise, you have friends, and I mean, you can disconnect the control arms and all kinds of other stuff. Of course, there's lots of tricks to get more droop, but honestly, this is how I'm gonna do it. Pretty straightforward. So what we're looking at here is the passenger side lift new Old Man Emu coil and the passenger side stock original coil. You're gonna notice that it's not much taller, right? So it's about, I don't know, maybe an inch or inch and a half or so taller itself, but notice the density of this spring versus the stock. So that's gonna create a lot of the lift itself, is just picking it up, which is great because it keeps a very similar geometry to the stock ride. So yeah, I mean, a 2-inch lift in 33s on a Land Cruiser 80 series, you're pretty much going wherever you want. I mean, you could go to 35s even on a 2-inch lift. But yeah, this is going to be awesome. So I'm getting excited as things are moving forward. Now we're looking at the front passenger shock. So you can see that it's a thicker shock body. It's also longer. So we're going to pick up that extra travel. It's only another, I don't know, really what we're looking at is the thread where the thread stops. So that is about an inch, 2 inches, I guess. There's your 2 inches. It's just a longer shaft. It's a thicker body for sure. I mean, the build quality, this rubber, it's really nice. This was like a plastic OEM. So this is a really nice upgrade. So this is going to do really well. And just like that. Honestly, you know, I was going to video each small section as I went through, but it's so straightforward. You know, it almost wasn't worth it. So I'll walk you through what happened. So once I placed the new shock back up, the original nut on the top of this shock is a 17 millimeter. The Old Man Emu upgraded shocks are a 19 millimeter nut on top. Also notice, as we zoom in here, on the top, obviously, when you're using a wrench, you got to use the small side of the open side of the wrench to tighten this. On the top here, I just use an 8 millimeter to hold the shock from spinning. Otherwise, if you're just hitting the nut, it's going to spin the shock and everything as it gets tighter. So yeah, 8 millimeter open wrench to hold the top, and a 19 millimeter to tighten this all the way down. And basically, you tighten it until it stops. So there's no way to do it wrong. It kind of compresses the little bushing in there. Can't really do it wrong. As far as fitting it up in there, super easy. Same thing with down here. It falls right in for you. Since the coil spring was not huge, as far as like a 3.5 inch or 6 inch lift or something crazy, honestly, it popped in pretty straightforward. And then as you see over here, I've already dropped this on the ground. So I put the wheel on, I've dropped this on the ground. You can now see with that painted hub, looks a lot cleaner, a lot meaner. So I've already taken out the jack stand on this side. So the front is almost done, but I do have that new steering stabilizer. So probably I'm gonna throw this other wheel and tire on, drop this on the ground. I'll get back under the front here and touch base when I'm doing the steering stabilizer. Just like that, we are back on the ground at 100%. So the steering stabilizer is now installed. Right here, looks great. When I took the original steering stabilizer off, that thing was just useless and gone. So it's nice to have a working one again. Definitely has some lift, that's for sure. It was expecting, you know, that weight because it's a medium duty spring. Did also, not that any of you guys care to see it, I'm not sure, but installed some rough country, I think 6 inch light bars in the bumper. It's all nice and clean, tucked away. Fuse is here. Well, I guess there's a fuse here too. There's a relay here. Yeah, I mean, this thing is all set. I ran the wiring down through the side, through this grommet in the firewall right here. And then it came out, well, actually, I don't think I put the wires away. Yep. So it came out, the firewall comes out kind of up in here somewhere in the middle. And then the switch I have coming out of the steering column right here. So, boom. Just like that. Just gotta tidy up those wires, and then I'm gonna move on to the rear. Sorry, I had to do a little side quest there, but you know, the lights were here, so, you know, wanted to get that done. Now with the front being completely wrapped up, shocks, steering stabilizer, new coils, coil springs. I reattached, obviously, the sway bar links. I reattached the axle breather tubes. I also reattached the emergency brake, or the brake lines. There's like a bracket on the frame that I mentioned earlier. So that's all been reattached. So now I've got the Land Cruiser up in the rear. And I've probably, whoops, let me hit my watch here. I started about 1:30. It's 7 o'clock. So that's 5.5 hours to do the entire front end and to wire up lights and the switch and everything I showed you earlier. That's really not too bad. I've kind of taken my time. Obviously, when you're filming this, you know, it just takes longer. I'm stopping, I'm talking, I'm setting up, you know, the next stage of everything. I've eaten a couple times. You know, I'm kind of taking my time with this and just kind of enjoying the process. Next, these wheels and tires are going to come off, and then I'm going to go ahead and let the axle start drooping more, and I'll pick up there once I've got those off. projects go a lot faster when you stop giving yourself side quests. But any of you video gamers out there, you'd know that comment. But I can't have fresh hubs up front without doing it to the rear. So I blasted these puppies off with a wire wheel down to the metal, and I have got a fresh coat of, again, the rust preventing or rust converting primer and paint. I think it's the Rust-Oleum's undercarriage or underbody paint. And then once you've obviously got the wheels and tires off and you're starting to droop, you're going to notice that the rear sway bar, which is this guy running here, and it runs around the back of the axle. Right there, you can see it come out behind the pumpkin there, the differential. Those are going to stop the axle from drooping all the way. So you're going to take out these guys. So you can see I hit a lot of WD-40 here, penetrating oil, whichever one you use. And these are 12 millimeter. So once those pop out, it lets the, it was in these tools right here, if you can tell. But it lets the axle droop down a little further. And I'm about to get to these rear shocks, which are disgusting. And then the rear springs. Now, again, a lot of what you're seeing is this truck was originally coated with that undercoating, the oil undercoating. So a lot of what you see when stuff flakes off and there's chunks on the ground, it's not really rust. There's a little bit of surface rust, obviously, but it's just huge chunks of that oil that's now over 30 years dried up and just clumping and falling off. I am not on camera on purpose right now because I am covered, like the back of my neck, my forehead, my face, in just, you know, all this stuff. So yeah, so fresh looking hubs, and we're just now about to get to where I'm going to start taking out the rear shocks, and then I'm going to start taking out the rear coils, or vice versa. I haven't decided. Once I'm in there, I'll know, and then I'll tell you what I did and what seems to go smoothest next. So yeah, there we are. Just like with the front coils, being only a 2-inch lift, it's not a ton taller. It's maybe an inch or so taller. It's just the fact that it's a lot beefier spring, higher spring rate. It's going to keep the lift. The cool part is, as I'm under here and I'm doing this, it should be relatively easy to get the new spring in, since it's not so much taller. Again, you know, I've got a Wrangler with a 3.5-inch lift, and those coils are a solid 3.5 inches plus the beef of, you know, supposed to carry more weight and stuff. So yeah, you know, I'm hoping these go in okay, but I am having trouble right now with the rear shocks. I got one bolt out. So as you see under here, where these, oh man, I don't know if you're getting any light under there. Anyway, under here, there's 2 bolts that go under the top. Maybe you can see a little bit now. I don't know. It's the near side one, like towards the outside of the body. And that thing is just really, you know, corroded at the head of the bolt itself on both sides. So I'm really struggling there. And it's just in a really bad spot where I can't get up in there. So, you know, you pretty much can't do a project without running into something like this. And I thought I was going to get away with it, but here we are. So, and again, that is all just huge chunks of that oil crap that falls off altogether. There's barely any surface rust on these things. It's wild. Just huge clumps. You can see it. That's all the oil stuff. Actually, right here, look. It just clumps off. So it makes a mess, obviously, too. So yeah, I'll check back in, see if I can get these rear shocks off. This is turning into one of those things. I am going to go ahead and put the springs in while, you know, have some positive momentum right now. It's about 8:20 p.m. I started this about 1:30 p.m. today. I did install some lights. It probably took me, you know, an hour on the front bumper too. So we're in it now. And just like that, it is 2:07 a.m. and that was 11.5 hours. Frankly, honestly, it was about 5 hours to get 2 bolts out, which were the 2 bolts on the rear shocks. They were just a nightmare. I don't know what the deal was. I mean, the heads of the screws were terrible. I was finally able to back them out, and then I had to work on the screws to kind of reshape them so that way the right size socket would fit them again. But we are all set. I didn't bother showing you everything else, but on the rears, you're going to take the sway bar links down, which are actually right here. Those 2 bolts on both sides. You're going to take down the emergency brake out of the middle. Super straightforward. It's a 12 millimeter. You're going to take down the brake line, right? So the brake line, the emergency brake, and the sway bar link, or the rear sway bars, take them down. And that's really all there is to it. As far as putting the new shocks on, you know, it was very simple. The bushings stack onto the shocks, just like on the front. So it's pretty much all the same thing. Yes, those are the rears. These things were, I mean, you know, it's always like that in the rear because everything from the winter gets sprayed up under the rear. Even notice the difference in the rear coils versus the fronts. They looked a lot cleaner in the front there, and then these were just like destroyed. So yeah, the rear shocks were a complete nightmare, and I'm absolutely certain these were 30-year-old original rear shocks. So this thing's gonna ride like brand new. New shocks, new coil springs, new steering stabilizer. I also did spray paint. I like hit with a wire wheel and then spray painted the hubs, so they're nice and fresh black. You know, fresh rubber, new wheels. You should do that. Then there was the old spare tire hanger, you know, to mount the spare tire underneath. That thing was just kind of rusted into one ball, so I took out a hacksaw and cut the chains off of that because they're kind of dangling beneath there. But yeah, this thing is done. It is looking a little high right now. The coils will settle as you drive it. I haven't even done a test drive. I am completely disgusting as we speak right now. So maybe one of the, I don't know, I had an H1 Hummer that I had a lot of projects on that, you know, there's a lot of crap falling out of that on me. So yeah, but anyway, this was about that bad. I mean, it's 30 years old. It's also the oldest vehicle I've ever worked on, so it makes sense that the most crap is falling on me. And the majority of everything was not rust. It was sand and just dirt, and then the oil film that they put on these vehicles to, you know, weather protect them. That stuff just clumps up in cake. So if I tapped anything with a rubber mallet, it just dumped everything off the frame and in my face, off the, you name it, it was coming off of there. So also I've got the light. I think maybe I showed this. The front light's wired to a switch right here. I've got the wires all hid in the steering column. It runs down. Obviously it's all tucked up in there. And then there's a grommet in the firewall, and that's where I pulled the plug through. And then we've got these 2 lights here. Now this is temporary, so it's not like an end product, but they're mounted, they're super sturdy. Without having to, you know, take them on the road and kind of give them a test, I'm not sure where the pattern's gonna fall on them. Maybe I can check it actually before I leave, or before I go back inside. Yeah, anyway, temporary. They fit in those pockets. I just have to take out the plastic inserts. There's 2 screws that hold just like a rubbery plastic insert in there. So this is going to have a nice punch of light and just some 6-inch rough country lights. But yeah, here we go. Yeah, it looks pretty beefy. But yeah, I mean, once the suspension settles after, you know, I don't know, a couple 100 miles or so and hitting bumps, and it'll work its way in, it'll settle real nice. But it's a 2-inch lift with medium duty springs. So, you know, it's probably weighted also for the bumpers and whatever you'd put on this thing. So anyway, yeah, that is it. And that is a wrap.